only cancer and heart disease have a greater mortality rate. Now, if you follow the premise that those numbers are based on underreporting, that suggests that medical malpractice might be the leading cause of death, but it's certainly up there. It's the equivalent of about 3 jumbo jets crashing every single day. And I'm not talking about just bad outcomes. I'm talking about preventable, serious medical error.
Hello, and welcome to the Attorney Post, your guide to the inside scoop when it comes to all things legal. And now, here's our host, Justin West.
All right. Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Attorney Post, where we discuss what's going on in various facets of the law with lawyers at the top of their game to help you navigate the ins and outs of various legal fields and jurisdictions. Because, as I always say, if you don't know your rights, you don't have any. Today, I'm very pleased to be joined by Eric Weitz, who runs the eponymous law firm that bears his name, the Weitz Firm, or the Weitz Firm, out in Philadelphia. Eric, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Justin. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. And I'm all of a sudden I'm panicking if I'm pronouncing your name. Is it with a W or is that a V? I mean, I know it's Weitz.
My parents say it's pronounced Weitz, so I'll go with that.
Okay. As long as you know how to pronounce your name, I guess that's the important part, right? Well, as always, let's jump over, take a really quick look here at your website. This is the WeitzFirm.com. That's WEITZ firm. That's the THE. WeitzFirm.com. We will, as always, have a link in the description down below. You can also reach out to him via phone, which is 267-587-6240. That's 267-587-6240. Hopefully I said that right both times. We'll have that in the description down below as well. So if you guys are looking to get a hold of Eric, you can definitely reach him that way. Before we get started, as always, we're going to take a look at our sponsors. Our sponsor at the top of the hour is, first off, Groove Funnels. If you love spending $5,000 to $10,000 to build a brand new website that you can, sell products to your clients, your customers, whatever it is, you want a really expensive platform that lets you host webinars, then by all means, keep doing whatever it is that you're doing. But if you're like me, you hate that stuff. And that's why I personally recommend Groove Pages, the all-in-one internet marketing Swiss Army knife from internet marketing legend, Mike Filsame. Right now, you can build a completely free website, host webinars, sell products, really at no cost, no credit card needed. Simply visit theattorneypost.com/groove. I believe you can actually build up to 3 fully functioning webinar or fully functioning websites. They've got Groove Pages, which is for websites. They've got Groove Funnels, which is kind of like your ClickFunnels for selling things to clients. They've got Groove Sell, which is a shopping cart for selling things. They've got Groove Mail for doing email. It does basically everything you want. And again, it's completely free to get started. I do know that they've got some upsells on the back end, but there's no reason not to give it a shot. So theattorneypost.com/groove. We'll have a link to that down below as well. Our second sponsor is National ERC. You may have noticed we just went through a pandemic not that long ago, and a lot of businesses were interrupted and forced to shut down, had reduced hours, had supply chain issues, interruptions, etc., and ultimately they suffered from reduced revenue in 2020 and 2021. What you may not know is that Congress passed that CARES Act, which allocated $400 billion in stimulus funds for small businesses that never needs to be paid back. It's not a loan like the PPP or Paycheck Protection Program. It's essentially free money, or it's a tax credit back from money you already spent that you can spend in any way that you see fit for your business. Right now, nationalerc.org is helping small businesses get the maximum amount of money that they can. And you can calculate and see how much business or how much money you can get back for your business by visiting nationalerc.org. The average small business that they work with gets back over $200,000 that they can invest in their business. Again, that never needs to be paid back. The calculator itself is completely free, and there is never a single fee unless they secure funding for you. They've secured over $1.3 billion in funding for small businesses with 3,200 people in their team nationwide. So absolutely, if you've not claimed this yet, you should go to nationalerc.org and look into that. All righty, so we are back with Eric. So Eric, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. It's a beautiful day here in Philadelphia. Fall is finally here. We'll take it.
Nice. My mother-in-law lives in Allentown, so not too far away. We drive near Philly on a not infrequent basis. My wife's a Pennsylvania, so she claims Pennsylvania as home, even though we live in Kansas. So Eric is a distinguished attorney and the founder of the firm that bears his name, which we just saw, the Weitz Law Firm, or the Weitz Firm, LLC. He specializes in various areas of practice, including medical negligence and catastrophic injury, particularly in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. He's a cum laude graduate from Villanova School of Law and the SI Newhouse School of Public Communication at Syracuse University. He's been recognized as a super lawyer by Philadelphia Magazine and named one of America's best lawyers, reflecting his dedication and expertise in the field. His extensive involvement in professional associations, coupled coupled with his commitment to pro bono activities like the Volunteer Attorney Homeless Advocacy Project and the Volunteer Lawyers for the Indigent Program. This is not my day for speaking. Showcase not only his legal prowess, but also his dedication to serving the community. So having said all that, it was kind of a mouthful, especially when your mouth just doesn't want to work today. I'm sure I missed some things out. I left some things out of there, Eric. So question number one is, what did I miss?
Yeah, I'm told I'm a father who's very unfair whenever my kids ask for anything. So I wear that moniker proudly. But professionally, one of the things that I'm finding I'm getting the greatest reward out of is about a decade ago, I was appointed by the Pennsylvania legislature to what's called our Pennsylvania Patient Safety Authority. It is a independent government agency. There's 7 directors. Only 2 of us are non-healthcare professionals. I'm one of the non-healthcare professionals. And we have the largest database probably in the world, certainly in America, of medical errors, everything from near misses to serious events. Pennsylvania has mandatory reporting when those bad things happen. And we have a team of extraordinary data scientists. We use outside groups as well. And it's been an amazing journey to really learn about what's going on in healthcare, why preventable errors are happening, where they're happening. And most importantly, where I spend an extraordinary amount of time is I can't solve systemic problems in an individual case, but through the Patient Safety Authority, we're really going after some of these big issues to try and make a difference in our world.
Awesome. So you really are out there, fighting the good fight and trying to help people both on the micro scale and the macro scale, person to person and systemically. That's pretty cool, actually.
Yeah, I gotta be honest, Justin. I've been trying cases for victims of preventable medical error for about 30 years, and you see it all. Everything from the minor calls you get every day on minor injuries, but are real, malpractice, to the catastrophic harms that can occur. And, doctors and nurses, they don't come to work every day wanting to hurt people.
Right.
They're trying to do their best. The system really that surrounds them has so many flaws and problems for a lot of reasons. And it became very frustrating, one case at a time, seeing the same errors over and over again, the same families going through tragedy over and over again. And I just got so frustrated that we couldn't make a difference that way. So, I decided to invest a good deal of time and additional education and patient safety and quality care to try and help out, because, I get to see it from the other side.
Gotcha. So let me ask you this: what got you into law? Especially, eventually getting into PI. But were you the kid that grew up and you wanted to everyone else is playing, I don't know, Fort, War, G.I. Joe, whatever kids played back in the day, and you were watching Perry Mason, or did you kind of stumble into law? And then when it comes to law, what got you into PI?
Yeah, I kind of stumbled into trial law. I coming out of the communication school at Syracuse, I had an opportunity for me in the business side of that industry in New York. And I had always wanted to get the law degree. I wanted to get the training. Back when I came out of college, everybody was getting their MBA. And, there were a lot of people going to law school, but not as many. And I always kind of thought I wanted to learn that method of thinking and approach. So I'd gone to law school with the intent of getting the law degree and then going back into the communications industry. And, different things happen, fate happens. I end up, a finalist in our moot court competition. Everybody's now telling me I'm a litigator, and of course I have to listen to everybody else. And I had a wonderful opportunity to join a great national litigation firm out of law school here in Philadelphia. So the detour occurred, and here I am.
There you are. And now you run the law firm that bears your name. Give me your pitch. If I didn't know anything about you, and obviously I do, but if I didn't know anything about you, you and I were stuck in an elevator for, half an hour, my goodness, 30 seconds to half a minute or so. And I asked you what you did. What would you tell me? Tell me the nuts and bolts of what you really focus on, who you help, et cetera, at your firm.
Clients come to any firm that does catastrophic, predominantly medical malpractice is what I do. And they always want 3 things. And I find most firms don't focus on all 3, but we do here. Now, number one, they want to know what happened. They often have bad things happen and nobody gets them the answers. We're very focused on getting the client the answer to what happened. You may not like what you hear, you may not like what you learn, but we're gonna do our best to get that answer. Number two, they want some level of accountability. Whether that's our tort system, which is a financial means of money or other support or things that they may need that our system can afford them. That's real because these catastrophic injuries ruin people's lives, and finances is always a part of it. I don't care how rich you are or how poor you are or anywhere in between. It impacts your life severely. And then the third thing, which a lot of firms don't focus on, and we've been very focused on, is my clients always say, and I believe them, they don't ever want it to happen to anybody else. And people truly mean that. And I've been working really hard. I'm working on a big motion right now. It's a case that's going to go up to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, probably. Trying to use different parts of the law to effectuate that remedy, to force hospitals to change bad policies and procedures or bad contracts with bad outside groups, and force them to make the meaningful change when we find out what caused the harm that happened in any individual case. And we're aggressive. We have a rich trial history of success, to add on top of that. So you want someone who understands, but you also want somebody who, when the time comes and the lights go on and you're in the courtroom, can get it done.
Gotcha. What's an example of one or two of those policies that have been the types of things that either get your clients hurt or that you've helped to change over the years?
Yeah, so a couple examples. I had a case involving a tragic injury to a newborn, and part of the problem was the hospital they had the policies in place, but they weren't training the people on how to properly respond when neonates have problems that they often have. And they didn't have the resources that the rest of the country and the rest of the hospitals knew how to put in place. And part of our conditions of settlement was that they had to implement those new procedures, and that they had to bring in certain people that we designated to retrain the people at the top to make that environment safer for newborn children. So that's an example. Another example is situations where there might be well-known policies on how certain patients have to be monitored, how often, what types of things, what you do with that information. Our healthcare infrastructure right now is great with those electronic medical records of grabbing all the data. The problem is what we are and aren't doing with it, and the fact that nurses are so overburdened because of understaffing, that they have the information, but they don't have the time to process it and do something about it. So sometimes it's requiring greater staffing ratios, it's annual training. It just depends on what caused the harm in a given case.
Gotcha. How prevalent is medical malpractice? Because I've seen some estimates that suggest it's one of the leading causes of death in the country. That feels so high. And I feel like if that was the case, you would be, there wouldn't be enough medical malpractice lawyers out there to solve them all. But I've seen enough data to think that probably is actually closer to accurate than I would like it to be. So how prevalent is it? What does medical malpractice really even entail? Like, is it dying on the operating table, getting the wrong leg taken off? Tell me the scope and the breadth and the depth of how serious this is.
Right. So medical malpractice is not just simply a mistake, or not just simply a bad outcome, because healthcare is not guaranteed. Our bodies react differently. Medicine's knowledge, it can only go so far. It's when a doctor, hospital, facility, nurse, whomever, fails to do even the minimum necessary of the standard of care. It also could mean, if 10 doctors choose to go left and 2 go right, just because your doctor went right and you had a bad outcome, that's not malpractice either. Malpractice is where the decision or the failure to act fell below any of the standards, and that is what caused harm. What's so difficult about medical malpractice cases is you're usually in the hospital or a doctor's office to begin with because something else is wrong. right? They didn't cause the cancer. They didn't cause the diabetes. They didn't cause the infection more times than not. It's the failure to timely address these things and see them and do the right thing with them. It's oh my God, the X-ray report came back and it shows something in the lung and nobody does anything for 3 years, right? But it crosses all barriers. How pervasive is it? Well, so part of the problem is in America, the way we track medical error is by self-report. And human nature, and I'm not suggesting people want to hide things, but there's a lot of emotional issues that go on when a patient suffers a preventable injury. People, physicians, nurses, administrators feel guilty. People have different responses. People are worried about financial harm. They're going to lose their license, which those things generally don't happen, but it's scary. And so what we know in general, in my experience on the Patient Safety Authority, from my own personal opinion, is that we have rampant underreporting of whatever systems exist, especially of the most significant error. But when studies were conducted, some of them started abroad, but then a very famous patient safety advocate and researcher down at Johns Hopkins did a study a number of years ago, and that study concluded that medical malpractice is the third leading cause of death in the United States. Only cancer and heart disease have a greater mortality rate. Now, if you follow the premise that those numbers are based on underreporting, that suggests that medical malpractice might be the leading cause of death, but it's certainly up there. It's the equivalent of about 3 jumbo jets crashing every single day. And I'm not talking about just bad outcomes. I'm talking about preventable, serious medical error. A recent study came out from that same group that the number of serious harms, not death, but serious harms, are so much greater than that. So this is real. And again, I don't say this with the intent of pointing fingers at doctors and nurses. It is the culture and the structure of our health environment today that is making it very difficult for people to have the protection that I want for my family and you want for yours.
Gotcha. So I have like 8 different questions I want to ask. I'm trying to figure out which question I want to ask you next. Okay, I'm going to ask you a fun question for a minute here. I'm sure you've dealt with some absurdity, cases where you're just like, I cannot believe all of these things happened in the way that they happened. I can't believe this decision was or wasn't made. What is obviously I know you're going to be respectful and not disclose anything more than you can disclose, but what's one of the most absurd things that you've encountered in your practice of law in medical mal and personal injury?
That's a hard one. It is amazing. For whatever reason, recently on one side, I'm getting a ton of calls of people who have plastic surgery, cosmetic, who are just not happy with the outcome. Like my wrinkles are still there and things like that. And that's always a tough discussion because I'm certain somebody has spent a lot of good money and cared enough to get those procedures. For whatever reason, it's not any one of those calls. It's the fact that I and my colleagues, I talked to, are getting a ton of them. And at the same time, you're reading of these deaths of people that are having Brazilian butt lifts and other things. So there's 2 sides of it. But I would have to say, and it's tragic, but the craziest fact scenario I had is where a doctor declared a baby dead that wasn't. And because of that, the baby went on to suffer prolonged depleted oxygen and severe brain damage. That one haunts me to this day.
That's rough. I was about to make a joke about the Brazilian butt lifts, but it's kind of hard to come back after.
Yeah, this is very doom and gloom. Part of my job is working with families to try and find not happiness, but some sort of closure, resolution, and a path forward.
So you deal with a lot of sensitive, impactful cases. You deal with a lot of families that are suffering, that are having a hard time. How does your team approach advocacy in a way that ensures that, your clients, that their story is told and told in a way that's both respectful to them, but also told with diligence in pursuing that end?
We listen. Um, I I've been in a lot of different firm environments, big commercial firm, medium-sized plaintiffs firms, in a boutique. Part of the reason I'm in a boutique is I want the time. I want to select the people that I think I can help. But in order for me to help somebody, I need to get to know them. I need to know what their life was. I need to know how their life changed. I need to go see them in their home. I need to see what there was and what there isn't. And I find juries crave authenticity. And the only way I think to present authenticity is to present it. Juries don't want to hear from me. I mean, trial lawyers all think it's their wonderful skills, but I think their best skill is listening to their client and putting their client out there in a way that allows the client to tell the story, because the human story is very compelling.
Gotcha. Totally random question again, but you mentioned juries. Have you ever been on a jury? I notice a lot of attorneys would love to be sitting on a jury. They oftentimes don't get the excuse, or if they get called and they find out that they're an attorney, they immediately are dismissed.
Yeah, no, we still have to show up, and I have not made it. Although my daughter, who just passed the bar last week, was just on a jury last week, and ultimately they excused her before the case went to deliberations. But no, I have not. And it's like a lifelong dream. We all talk about it. I would love to. I mean, I also, like a lot of trial lawyers who do catastrophic work, we do a lot of focus group and mock juries and mock trials. So it's very interesting for me, because I don't, in a real case, get to sit in on deliberations, but it's fascinating to talk to people, listen, to work with them, to watch the videos of deliberations, but never been on one yet.
Gotcha. One of the sponsors I read for was nationalerc.org, and that was all about the pandemic. Obviously, we got through the pandemic. I would say that we seem to have made headway, and it's going to be with us perennially at this point, but I don't think anyone's going to be locking back down, hopefully. Knock on wood, wherever the wood is around here. But obviously, a lot of people during the shutdown and in the aftermath of the shutdown have made some big changes to how they work. I'm sure you guys experienced a series of changes at your firm. How did the pandemic affect you guys? How did it affect the way you relate to your clients, if at all? How did it affect the way you relate to the court? And did you ever have to do a Zoom jury? Or can you foresee a future where Zoom juries happen? Or would that be a nightmare?
Yeah, so like this is a topic that could go on forever. My firm pretty much moved into discovery mode, no trials. The court shut down, they limited access, they were wrestling with their issues. And we have cases all over the country, and it was pretty common, even the federal cases. So it had an impact where a lot of my clients had to wait until this year. And these are cases that were filed multiple years before the pandemic, could work their way into the system, get trial dates to get either a trial or a resolution. So it had an impact in that we were pushing a lot of paper, doing a lot of Zoom depositions, Zoom motion arguments, which I don't know, maybe I'm old school and I spent so much of my career in a courtroom. I can't stand doing it that way. But some good things have come out of it. Some efficiencies have come out of it. There were court proceedings where you drive over, wait an hour in court, sit there, reading your stuff that you've already read 10 times, go in, see the judge, have your conference, come back, or, sit there for 3 hours for your 20-minute motion argument on a busy day, that have all moved to a virtual platform, that have made it so much more efficient. So there may be some advocacy changes in terms of how you present things in Zoom. I find Zoom depositions are very useful for certain types of depositions, but for others, they're terrible. And it also depends on the witness and everything else. We videotape all our depositions, so that has some impact in terms of the back and forth and sharing documents and everything else. I was slated to pick a jury via Zoom. And then they were uncertain how the case was going to try. I'm admitted in New Jersey as well. New Jersey, until recently, is still selecting jurors by Zoom. I did not go through it. I had nightmares about having to do that. The people I talk to are kind of, you have no choice, so you do it.
Yeah.
I don't think it's the preference of anyone. I think the jurors love it because they don't have to run down to the courthouse, sit there for hours. But I don't think there's going to be many Zoom juries. I did do a couple Zoom arbitrations, so in front of a private arbitrator as opposed to the court with no jury. I just think you lose something. And I think there are efficiencies to be gained and will be gained. Our Pennsylvania Supreme Court is wrestling with that now. To what extent are we going to use this type of technology? And I think most states are. But I still think you lose something. And I think for the same reason people still go to Broadway shows, they go to plays, they interact. People want to see witnesses. They want to feel them. They want to be in the room.
Yeah. I've heard some people make the argument that they think that doing everything virtually makes everyone a little more dispassionate and so therefore potentially more objective. But I've also heard people say that part of what makes a jury trial work is you can glance over at the jury whenever you want. So somebody was saying that the prosecution made a claim and they knew that it was false, and he looked over at a juror and the juror looked right back at him, and they made eye contact, and you just knew that you guys are on the same wavelength. And in Zoom you can't really do that, right? In fact, we're simulating eye contact right now, looking at the top of the computer screen or whatever. You can't really do the eye contact thing in Zoom the way you can in real life. So I imagine it would have a detrimental impact in the end. But do you think it would make people more objective?
I just think that there's so many false narratives out there about trial practice, juries, and other aspects, right? Any level of persuasion, any presentation. I was listening to a focus group once about why they hate trial lawyers so much. And look, my colleagues at times go to great lengths to make sure the public hates us. But right, for the most part, it's a caring, smart group of folks who are trying to help others. And and this focus group talked about how what they feared most was that we were going to come into court and we were going to blow some magic dust on them and make them do something they didn't want to do. It was very interesting. Like, it'd be amazing to have that kind of mind control power, but we really don't, right? And that notion that
my client,
right. These are not the droids. If we are emotional creatures. We kid ourselves thinking we rationalize single thing we do and that we can remove it. But I find more times than not, whether it's a emotional story or not emotional story, jurors, more times than not, it doesn't matter what their education is, they tend as a group to get it right. Not always, right? We have appellate courts for that, but for the most part, they get it right. And I think part of it is the human experience. And, Netflix gets old after a while.
Fair enough. Speaking of Netflix, I'm sure you've noticed just in your practice that the legal landscape has changed. I'm sure you deal with things now that you've never had to deal with before. In certain PI space, I know there's a rise in things like the little e-scooters, that weren't even a thing, 10 years ago, or services like Uber and Lyft that weren't a thing, although you had taxis and other kinds of public transportation. What are some of the big changes in the legal landscape that you've really encountered in your field that kind of stand out to you over the last couple of decades?
Yeah, well, in terms of the practice of law, those kind of mid-sized firms in my business, don't really exist anymore. You have these big powerhouse plaintiffs firms that have a ton of really good lawyers doing a ton of good work. And then you have a number of boutiques where people kind of specialize, and there's different reasons why the boutiques exist. But between the costs of cases, the demands, with everything now being electronic, with almost every court filing and email, everything's got to be immediate, right? You don't have an extra 3 days or 5 days, so you need greater resources. In terms of the type of cases I handle, I would say the number one game changer has been the electronic medical record. I think you'd be hard pressed to find a doctor out there, old or young, that thinks the electronic medical records are a good thing. There are so many additional problems and risks and frustration built into that system. It was really designed to help make sure they capture everything to get reimbursed for it.
Yeah.
Not necessarily capture everything to care for the patient, although they try. Those systems, and what I've seen as a guy who tried cases before and after electronic medical record, what's happened is doctors spend more time on the electronic chart than they do speaking with each other. And that loss of discussion and communication, I think, is having a big impact.
That's it. I actually thought you were going to take that in the exact opposite direction and saying that the electronic records was a big boon or a big help, but no, it's quite the opposite. That's interesting. And I've never heard someone say that before. So that's kind of fascinating. My father-in-law is a medical doctor who practices in Pennsylvania. He's on the other side of the state from you, but I know he spends like his Fridays are just chart days. He just sits down and he just does charts all day long. And he doesn't have time to even see patients on Fridays. It's just like chart. So that's
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah. I mean, it really is. It's and I don't even know what the solution to that is. Get them someone who can do HIPAA compliant clerical work or
They have them. They have scribes now. There are certain people, but the problem is there are some good things to come out of medical records, right? In terms of capturing data and then having little algorithms, we'll call it AI, running in the background that can help with decision making. The problem is sometimes nuance is important. And just checking this box or that box doesn't allow you the nuance, and it doesn't allow you to communicate that to others who might. Now, don't get me wrong, at least I can read these charts. I spent the first half of my career not being able to decipher, having to take multiple depositions, just saying, can you please read that? Because that is not in any known language. I mean, the handwriting was atrocious and everything else, which led to a lot of errors. But now you've got, what happens if somebody put in a medication a certain way? Does it mean you took it today or you didn't take it today? And what happens if they give you a double dose? And like the number of problems are just exploding from the electronic medical record.
I've seen some terrible doctor handwriting, and that's the joke. I mean, there's lawyer jokes are a thing because a lot of people just don't like the lawyer, but doctor handwriting jokes is its own line of comedy because doctors do quite often have terrible handwriting. How often does that become an implicatory factor in someone taking the wrong medicine or taking too much of the medicine? The pharmacy gives them the wrong dose because that's what the doctor's handwriting said, or they read it that way. Is that a common thing, or is that
it used to be? Everything's digital now. You call your doctor says, I'll send over something to the pharmacy, it'll be waiting for you, and then you get a text message from your pharmacy. I mean, there's nothing that was ever written, right? And pharmacists who do get those things, generally the old rule was you call if you were uncertain. And they still do, but and there are still people who handwrite things, but it is so rare these days, especially with all the pre-certification that's all built into the software.
That would make sense, I guess. That's interesting. I still get written prescriptions all the time, but I live in a very small town, so we move things a little more slowly out here. So let me ask you this. You've been practicing for a long time. Obviously, you've got a lot of experience. One of my favorite questions to ask people is about some of your greatest successes, but also your greatest failures. I'm a firm believer that failure can be a really great teacher. I think most people are, as long as you learn from it. If you learn from it, it's a slow burn win. Can you let my listeners know, Eric, about a time in your practice of law at any point where you experienced something that you consider to be a failure? Maybe a case didn't go your way. Maybe a client said the wrong thing. A witness didn't do what you thought they were going to do, whatever it happens to be. And what did you learn from that? And how do you carry that forward to better help and serve your clients moving forward?
This is going to sound self-serving. It's not intended to be, because I still view this as one of my greatest failures. One of my favorite books, I read it every year, is Sun Tzu, The Art of War. Not that I look at litigation as war, but the concept of strategizing to achieve a result with someone opposing you on the other side is exactly what I do for a living every day. And one of the things that Sun Tzu teaches is that to achieve the goal, you have to pick the right framework or right field of battle. And I had a case years ago where I represent a child who was in foster care who suffered a catastrophic injury in an auto accident. And I didn't think carefully enough about what environment, what place would allow me to achieve the best result that I could keep for my client. And as a result, I went with kind of the conventional wisdom instead of thinking it through. And I ended up getting an enormous verdict, probably one of the biggest verdicts in the federal court here in Philadelphia for an individual plaintiff. And it was too big. So when the case got to the next level, the circuit court really did backflips to try and find a way to undo the verdict, which ended up leaving my needy, catastrophically injured client without what his needs have been for the rest of his life. I'm still in touch with him today, and this is 20 years later. It really taught me the value of not just knee-jerk reaction to everything you do, that every client deserves, and you really got to take a step back and think about the bigger picture and the strategies, not just here's what the law says, here's where you typically go, here's what you do, but that every case needs its own solution. And sometimes you got to think out of the box.
Gotcha. What happens when that does happen and the judgment or the ruling gets appealed and they wind up having to either give some money back or not get it awarded? Do they get some of the money up front and then sometimes have to relinquish the money, or is that the type of thing they don't get it until it's finally done litigating and being appealed? What happens there?
The defendants usually post a bond to protect the judgment in case you win, and they hold it. Interest continues to run, and then it depends what the appellate court does. The appellate court can reverse all of it, they can reverse part of it. Here they reverse part of it, not all of it, but a big chunk of it. So my client got something that has been meaningful in his life, but not the life-changing amounts that were taken away. And they didn't even give me a chance to go back under the new theory that the appellate court created to go try that theory. It taught me a lot of lessons about politics as well. Not that the court was acting in a political way, but what influences decision-making in government.
Gotcha. So, well, the flip side of that coin is I'm sure you've had some great successes as well. I'm sure you've helped people put their lives back together, recover from the loss of the ability to work, the loss of a spouse, a loved one, a child, whatever it happens to be. And obviously you got to be sensitive to what you share and can't share, but can you tell our listeners about one or two of the cases that you're most proud of having worked on, the ones that you think made the most difference, either to the legal landscape as a whole, or to, a particular client? They're like, man, this client was really in a bad spot, and I'm so glad things resolved the way that they resolved.
Yeah, so this is where the trial lawyer book says I'm supposed to talk about big verdicts, but I'm not going to. I got to tell you, it was very personal for me, this story. When my son was young, he had a number of health problems. And my wife and I were both working in law firms, and we were on health insurance. And he needed a certain type of medicine that was in this bizarre category that apparently used to get approved all the time, and then insurance carriers stopped approving it. And we went back, and we're so fortunate here in Philadelphia to have the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, a world-class entity, and went back and met with the leaders there. And they said, yeah, they used to approve these and they stopped, just because it got expensive. And there is this terrible law called ERISA, E-R-I-S-A, which governs all health and welfare benefits of anybody that's employed in the United States, unless they're employed by a government or a church. So about 80+% of the workforce has this law, and the law really slants everything in favor of the insurers. Any decision they make, as long as they can kind of put anything around it to make it seem reasonable. And so there's an internal process you got to go through to fight insurance claims. And look, at the time, my wife's not anymore, but we were both, she was on the other side, but we're both lawyers who spend time in a courtroom, and we know how to use the process to achieve results. Make a long story short, we went all the way through the process, and the day we were heading down to court to hold a press conference and file this lawsuit on behalf of our son, the insurance company changed their mind. And we made it a condition that they change their mind, not just for our son, but for all the kids in the same situation. But we didn't stop there, because we then worked with the hospital, and I put together a group of attorneys where we used to represent families for free that couldn't otherwise afford lawyers to fight their insurance companies under these very difficult rules under ERISA to help them get access to the cancer care, the medical care that they needed to save their kids' lives. And there was no money in it for me or my trial lawyer colleagues, but it was a way to use our skills to try and help others.
Leads actually into the next question I was going to ask you. Was, I know you've done a lot of pro bono work. I mentioned a couple in the intro that I read earlier, some of the things I snagged off your bio. Can you tell my listeners a little bit about some of the pro bono work that you do, some of the stuff that you think is the most important stuff or the most meaningful stuff, or, the stuff that drives you to do what you do?
Yeah, I think what drove me into the plaintiff side or the victim side of the law is the kind of little guy getting taken advantage of by the big guy, and the little guy needing people to help. People are willing to take on. I've tried cases against Johnson & Johnson. I've gone at, I've stood up against some of the biggest entities in the country, against the US government at times. And I think the pro bono cases, everything, I mean, you read some of them that I've done over my career. I told you about a few more that I don't put on my resume because it wasn't through a formal program, but you just do it. I can't tell you how many lawyers that, have this bad image of being greedy and everything else, who in their practices every day get that phone call and say, you know what, I'm not going to make any money, but I'm going to help this person. But I think probably now working on behalf of groups of victims, especially, why do you rob banks? Because that's where the money is. Follow the money. I think the insurance industry has such a powerful stranglehold over so many facets of our life. And when I get opportunities to try and help people not get taken advantage of, when the insurance companies refuse to fulfill those promises that they make through their policies, through their advertising, everything else, that's something that I relish.
Gotcha. That makes sense. And it's really, I know that they recommend lawyers do pro bono work. I've talked to a lot of lawyers like, oh, we never do, or we phone it in. So it's kind of neat to hear the different things that you're doing, and that is such an impactful thing. That's awesome.
I will tell you a quick pitch here. I was chairman of the board of the Philadelphia Bar Association. Our Philadelphia legal community has one of the biggest pro bono infrastructures of any major city in the United States. The amount of representation that all lawyers in the Philadelphia community commit, it is a culture here, and it's a wonderful one.
Nice. You guys trying to one up each other? Like, oh, I did this pro bono. Well, I did this pro bono.
What it's becoming, though, is an interesting opportunity for young lawyers, especially at big firms, who don't get a chance to get into court, to actually get into court and do things.
Oh, okay. So it's almost like what's the word I want to use? Like, oh gosh, I can't even think of, my brain is all of a sudden not wording correctly. So I guess just, getting to test your chops before you test your chops, in a sense. That's not what I want to say, but that's the only words that are coming to brain right now.
Yeah, it's a great training opportunity, because young lawyers are all, I'll oversee somebody who might be handling a younger person handling a pro bono case, and I got to tell you, it's a unique opportunity, and a young tenacious lawyer is going to get amazing results.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, Eric, I want to thank you first off for taking the time to talk with me today. I do want to be respectful of your time. We've already been going for a good long while here. So in a minute, I'm going to probably wind down our conversation and ask you my two final questions. As a reminder, my audience know those questions well. Question number one will be, if we could go back in time, meet a young Eric fresh out of law school, what advice would you give yourself, and why, other than, of course, the obvious, which is buy a lot of Bitcoin, hold it till 60K. And question number two is, if I gave you my magic pen And with this magic pen, you can strike a law from the books, you can change the law that's on the books, or you can add a new law to the books. What law would you add and why? So while you're percolating on that, let's jump back over really quickly. We're going to do a quick screen share and take a look at your website again. I am talking with Eric Weitz. He runs the law firm that bears his name, the Weitz Firm LLC. That's theweitzfirm.com. He runs it with Max Morgan, who is a lawyer partner of his. I think Max, if I recall, does a lot of stuff that deals with the TCPA, the Telephone Consumer Act, and a few other things like that. Obviously, Eric is a specialist when it comes to catastrophic injury, medical malpractice, and various complex litigations. He works in the Philadelphia area. Now, one quick question I haven't asked you is how far around Philly, and you are licensed in New Jersey, so the Philadelphia side, New Jersey, I'm guessing you probably go, how far around the area do you work?
Yeah, I live and work in Philly, so if I can walk everywhere, it's great. But no, for the right case and the right opportunity, we'll go anywhere.
Awesome. So if you're in Hawaii, he would love to talk with you. He'll fly out there and enjoy that.
We have a consumer fraud case there right now.
Well, there you go. Well, actually, I said that just joking, and I'm like, well, actually, there's a lot of I've talked to people because of the whole Maui thing that happened, and there's a whole discussion about what's going to happen there. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. Maybe another different place, beautiful Alaska or something. Anyway, down below, as always, we'll have Eric's law firm. You can click on it. That's theweitzfirm.com. He also seems to have, Twitter presence, Facebook, LinkedIn as well. And of course, his number is 267-587-6240. That's 267-587-6240. I assume that if you got a question, you can give him a phone call or fill out a form on his website and probably schedule a free consultation. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, let's jump over one more sponsor. This is Rank with News. If there was a guaranteed way to get your law firm or your business featured in major national publications like Yahoo News, Forbes, Bloomberg, Business Insider, and others, and to see those articles rank locally, even nationally, sometimes in under 8 hours for major competitive keywords that people were looking for, what else would you need to know? Rank with News is simply the most powerful way to hit page one in under 2 weeks, safely, organically, and quite often permanently. This is essentially guaranteed SEO or search engine optimization on steroids, ranking quickly and sticking long term. Visit rankwithnews.com or rankwith.news to learn more and book a time to speak with a specialist about featuring your firm or your business in major national 8-figure traffic sites that can launch you to page one of Google in a matter of hours, help you dominate your local marketplace, get media exposure, rank higher in Google, build credibility, and ultimately win more customers and more clients. That's rankwith.news or rankwithnews.com. All right, so fun question time. Question number one, we go back in time. We meet a young Eric, fresh out of law school, and you're able to give yourself some advice, and of course, by extension, any other law students who are, fresh out of law school and trying to figure out their way in the world. What advice would you give yourself, Eric, and why?
I think listening to yourself rather than everybody else around you. I mean, having mentors is critical, but especially in the legal field, everybody loves to talk. And everybody loves to talk about newest trends, newest ideas, the hot firm, whatever. And I think it's very easy to get, and I did at times, get caught up in that. And I think that can influence some decisions to kind of veer you off your path. Everybody has a different path. Nobody's going to do the exact same thing as anybody else. And I think, have a little confidence to listen to yourself more. Gotcha.
That's good advice. Did you have any mentors in your time growing up and becoming a lawyer? Who played a big role in your direction in your life as an attorney?
Yeah, I mean, most of my mentors before I went to law school were in other industries and other parts of life. We did have one family friend who was a lawyer who said that he didn't think I'd ever be able to make it because he just didn't think I was tenacious enough as a kid. I don't know, maybe he's right. We're going to find out. But once I started practicing, I've been unbelievably lucky, whether it was just through happenstance or whatever, through employment, to have a number of mentors who I have learned so much and have lifted me up. And, very few lawyers learn this craft on their own or just by doing it. You really need guidance.
Gotcha. Well, that makes perfect sense. Yeah, 100%. Question number two. My magic pen. This pen comes from St. Benedict's Abbey, which is a Catholic Benedictine abbey in Atchison, Kansas, which happens to be where I live. I mention that because I found that this pen has a magical property that it allows you to strike a law from the books, edit a law, or change a law that's on the books, or add one that's not already there. If I were to loan you my pen and you could make one change, Eric, it could be a big law with sweeping national, even international ramifications. It could be a tiny little law that makes you fill out forms in triplicate 8 times a week. What would you change and why?
I think it goes back to what I said earlier. I think that law of ERISA, which affects 80% of the people in this country, and really there is not a level playing field when it comes to their health and welfare benefits. How many people do we all know who take jobs just to get the benefits? That's how important they are. I think if we could either wipe it out and start over with what it was intended to do, which was to prevent employers from stealing money from pension funds, and limit it to that, it'd be great. But I just think so many people face so many problems and give up and are harmed because of the overwhelming power that the insurance industry and self-insureds have over people's benefits.
Gotcha. It's a good answer. It's a powerful answer. I think you're the first person to mention that particular answer. So that's kind of fun. I like it. Well, Eric, again, thank you very much for taking the time to talk with me today. I do always like to give my my guests the final word. Do you have any parting words of wisdom or any last thoughts for any of our listeners out there who might be tuning in?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for having me on. I really
pleasure.
appreciate it. The one thing I would say, given what I've learned about healthcare and malpractice, is no one person should ever be fearful of being their own advocate when they have a health problem. There's no question that's dumb. There's no question that's foolish. Ask the questions, make sure you understand what's going on. And if you think something's wrong, there's no reason that you should not push back. Don't be rude, don't be hostile, don't attack, but you have a right to know what's going on with you and where things are going. And if you're not your own advocate, nobody else will be.
That is good advice. I like it. Well, thank you again, Eric, very much for taking the time to talk with us today. This has been The Attorney Post. If you are listening to this on YouTube, we always appreciate a like, a subscribe, and a share. As always, this Attorney Post, obviously, we've been chatting with Eric Weitz. He runs the eponymous law firm that bears his name, the Weitz Firm. Link and phone number down below, as always, in the description. Though we do deal with legal topics on this podcast does not constitute legal advice. And should you find yourself needing the advice of an attorney, seek out the advice of a competent attorney in your area who can help you with the need that you have. Obviously, having had this conversation with Eric, I can say I'd be very confident in referring you to him. So if you're in the Philadelphia area or anywhere around there on the New Jersey side of touching PA or whatnot, feel free to reach out to him. Again, link in the description below, theweitzfirm.com, 267-587-6240. But always seek advice from somebody because, as I always say, if you don't know your rights, you don't have any. Until next time, this is Justin. Thanks for listening, guys, and bye-bye.